Viewers, it's a dream budget for middle class India. There's no two ways about it. When Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman got up to present her 8th budget, a record in itself, no one would have thought that she was about to set a record for state-backed tax welfareism. Indeed, by effectively making income up to rupees 12 lakh tax-free, the Finance Minister has handed Indians, specifically of the middle class, the biggest tax cut in history. Now, viewers, I just want to put this in perspective for you, because from 2004, when the UPA was in power, only those who earn less than 2 lakhs were exempt from paying income tax at the peak. Today, when Narendra Modi is in power since 2014, that figure is 6 times greater. Anyone earning now less than 12 lakhs, which is annually 1 lakh a month, will not have to pay any income tax and will be making a saving de facto of about 80,000 rupees per annum. Here is Nirmala Sitharaman scripting history earlier today. Listen it, viewers.
Personal income tax reforms with special focus on middle class. Democracy, demography, and demand are the key support pillars in our journey towards Vikasit Bharat. The middle class provides strength for India's growth. This government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has always believed in the admirable energy and ability of the middle class in nation building. In recognition of their contribution, we have periodically reduced their tax burden. Right after 2014, the nil tax slab was raised to 2.5 lakhs of rupees, which was further raised to 5 lakh rupees in 2019 and to 7 lakh rupees in 2023. This is reflective of our government's trust on the middle class taxpayers. I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees.
The middle class, which accounts for about 31% of India's population and makes up a core support bloc of the Bharatiya Janata Party, was beginning to feel discontented due to the huge tax burden on it, viewers. Reeling from high inflation, low wage growth, not sufficient to cover price rise, high taxation and meager household savings, the taxpayers, you all know, was feeling cheated to some extent. The fact that personal income tax collections had exceeded corporate tax collections had also added to the frustration. Now, as the revised tax slabs that are on your screens show, this is all about to change, and that too very, very dramatically, leaving more money in the hands of taxpayers. The step is expected to boost demand, kick off a multiplier effect, increase private investment and stimulate GDP growth. All of this will happen from the 1st of April, viewers, this year itself. So this is not something that has been left for some infinite time in the future. It will happen in precisely a month and a half, 2 months max, viewers. That's what it all looks like. If you earn up till 12 lakhs per annum, you pay 0 tax because you get a rebate. You have to file your taxes, but you get an absolute rebate. You'll have money in your hands. You'll be saving up to about 80,000 rupees a year. That is a significant amount of money. 16 lakh also, viewers, you're ending up paying lesser. 20 lakh, 24 and 50 lakh across the board, specifically up till the 24 lakh mark, you are going to benefit in some way or the other. Here's why this tax break doesn't just make for good politics, because it is winning a lot of goodwill for the Narendra Modi government. But apart from the goodwill, it is also good economics. The FM says that personal income tax cut will cost the government revenue loss of rupees 1 lakh crore. A total of 6.7 crore Indians earning up to about 10 lakhs filed income tax in 2024, 2024, viewers. Potentially, this means that 6.7 crore Indians now will be exempt from paying income tax. Even if one were to assume that 10 to 20% of these bank the money they save, that still leaves 5 crore Indians with money to spend. These 5 crore Indians could potentially plow back money saved into the economy, even if it is assumed that 80% of rupees 1 lakh crore is spent by the middle class. It will hugely boost consumption. Professor K.V. Subramanian has in fact come out and estimated that the effect of this spend will boost consumption by 10%, raising GDP over 8%. A comparison of the records of the UP and NDA shows that Modi has now established himself as the OG of middle class messiah, the original. And you can look at those numbers, viewers. You can see the tax exemptions. And you can see how today they have climbed to this dramatic level, historic level. The budget signaling has been so strong that the opposition has been left carping about why Bihar got so much play in the budget and other states ignored, or that the tax cut is not what it is being made out to be, but just headline management, why the tragedy at the Kumbh wasn't discussed before the budget was presented, and so forth. But while the opposition is entitled to its views, there are some questions that arise, and let's open up, viewers, and ask some of these questions. We are joined tonight by a prestigious panel of informed guests all through this evening. And I want to bring in Milind Deora first off the block. We also have the ex-director of the IMF, the ex-CEA of India, Mr. Subramaniam. We also have Sanjay Jha, who is commenting today on economics and also, of course, the politics of it all. But let's have an evolved conversation. I want to bring in Milind Deora. Mr. Deora, thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. Now, you joined the NDA about a year and a little back, if I'm not mistaken, formally. Now, you must have been on the other side for a considerably long period of time and would have been aware of the cynicism some of the opposition shared about perhaps the NDA's being blindsided to middle-class interests. And the opposition always stood up and said, we are the guardians of the Aam Aadmi, so to speak. Do you believe today significantly the tables have turned?
Rahul, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Look, to be honest, I've always spoken in national interest.
Yeah.
And that, to me, has been my primary focus, regardless of which party or alliance I represent or I'm defending. In my opinion, you raised a few interesting points about the middle class. Very quickly, if I were to address that, I think one very, very welcome trend in today's finance minister's budget presentation is that we have demonstrated that if you trust the Indian taxpayer, you will automatically get greater compliance. And because of greater compliance, I think the finance minister has had the flexibility to take this massive decision. Not just reducing the tax burden on the middle class, but also reducing, more importantly, in my opinion, reducing the compliance burden, ensuring that harassment is permanently done away with. That, to me, is what we have to aspire to, and that's something which the finance minister has all the power in the world. The second more critical issue, which I took away when I was watching the budget presentation from the Rajya Sabha gallery, is that if you look at the world today, and I think it's very important for any government to address the challenges that India will potentially face given what's happening globally. Today, globally, Rahul, there are all kinds of political and technological disruptions underway, from the United States all the way to China.
Yes.
There are potential trade wars that we must brace for. And what is extremely critical is to ensure that Indian businesses, and when I say Indian businesses, not large corporates, but MSMEs, micro industries, startups, are export ready and can take on this challenge successfully. And I think the biggest advantage in today's budget, much more than the relief given to middle class, which I do agree was overdue, is that there is an attempt and an initiation to reduce regulatory hurdles that doesn't mean less regulation. It means smart regulation, but not regulation that strangles a startup entrepreneur. That to me was a very, very welcome step. The fact that there will be a reduced compliance burden through the income tax and other agencies. You have the income tax bill which will be tabled in Parliament. In some ways, I think it's linked to the Direct Tax Code of 2010. This will also make business far more efficient, will reduce ambiguities. In doing so, it will also reduce litigation, which also, by the way, we know overburdens our judiciary. And I think there are 2 or 3 other very significant areas that, unfortunately, none of us are talking about, which are extremely critical given what's happening in terms of the political and technological disruptions. One, Rahul, is when we're talking about artificial intelligence and the fact that Deep Sea now has unnerved everyone from in the Western world. The artificial intelligence boom, if you will, is also leading to a huge push towards nuclear energy. Small modular reactors, micro reactors. The finance minister, in fact, in her last budget speech, spoke about small modular reactors, but today she actually laid out a framework on how India will be ending the government's monopoly in nuclear power generation and allowing private companies to come into this space, allowing hopefully foreign capital as well, bringing in the best technology, which is extremely important for India's green transition needs. Secondly, the fact that while some duties, import duties, have been reduced on critical minerals, rare earths, like lithium, for instance, and that will aid our green transition in the short term, that there is a huge push by this government to now encourage mining of critical minerals and rare earths, which will aid our long-term efforts to secure the supply chain so that we're not dependent on other countries, including China, which, as we know, controls about 80% of the value addition for lithium and EV batteries. So I think these are significant steps that the government has taken. In my opinion, as a person who lives in Mumbai, who sees the challenges that cities like mine face, they've announced, the government, the finance minister has announced a 1 lakh crore fund, which is an urban challenge fund, which I hope will be used to incentivize state governments to undertake urban reforms.
So like you're saying that there is definitively a reformist underpinning to this entire budget, and there is also a significant commitment to deregulation, just as the CA had asked for. And of course, on top of that, an important incentive to spark demand, which is really where the problem was. I think that's very comprehensively put by you. Let me bring in the Professor K.V. Subramaniam and Sanjay Jha. Professor Subramaniam, how do you see this historic tax cut? Just situate this in a larger context for us, please.
I think, Rahul, the impact of the tax cut on consumption and thereby on GDP for this year will be substantial. And I think here, we have to understand that unlike in the case of capex or infrastructure spending, where the benefits actually last over several years, a tax cut, the impact of that actually is there only for this year. But I think the impact will be substantial because, as the finance minister said, this is about 1 lakh crore of revenue foregone, which is money directly in the pockets of the middle class. And if you look at the numbers, this section actually saves about 18%. That's the 2023 data. So let's round it off to 20%. That makes it conservative because, a higher saving means lower consumption. And, using the concept of consumption multiplier, therefore, I do think that this will actually translate into, consumption multiplier about 5. That is about 4.7% of the consumption estimate, 4.7% additional increase compared to, the consumption increase as it is that would have happened, and about a 2.7% GDP increase because, do remember, Rahul, that about 60% of our GDP comes from consumption. So this will provide significant fillip. I hope that this will also, help sort of trigger private investment because, industry has been saying, oh, we're waiting for demand to actually, to increase. In a scenario where demand is likely to be increasing in double digits this year, I think that is the absolutely apt time for industry to start doing the investment and thereby accelerate the virtuous cycle.
So obviously also, narrowing the gap when it comes to trust. That's very, very interesting. You're very conservative. You have been always. So this number that you've put, 2.7% upwards of GDP push, that is very big coming from you. Sanjay Jha, the question is obvious. Has the finance minister in one stroke hit the opposition's charge of tax terrorism and being negligent of middle-class interests, etc., out of the park? It's a simple, straightforward question. You've heard two individuals who, one, of course, who held an economic portfolio in the UPA, in the Congress UPA, and another person who has been in government in the past. They've both put a perspective on this, and I think they've been quite fair.
Rahul, let me be succinct and come to the point. You yourself in the introduction said that the middle class has been getting a raw deal and a lot of improvements were overdue. Now, if something is overdue, I really don't understand the big hullabaloo about the announcements today, because the middle class has been at the receiving end of this government's policies for a considerable time. They felt sandwiched. They felt they were not getting the benefits they deserve. So I think we need to temper and sober our, the hype and the hullabaloo here for two reasons. There's a very important context. The country is facing a clear, perceptible economic slowdown. The GDP is slowest in the last 4 years. And if you look at the 5.4% that we had in the second quarter, the signals are worrying. Look at the growth of GDP between 2019 till now. Pre-pandemic, we were down to 4%. And despite the COVID pandemic and whatever money was flushed in, the fact remains that the GDP has been just 5%. An economy of the size of India, battling around 800 million people who live on free food grains, and the poverty, they are so susceptible to poverty, cannot be an economy that you can be excited about if it's growing at 5 or 6.4%. Now, here is the point that I think a lot of people, actually, at least both Milind and I think the professor may have missed, that end of day, go back to the 4 components of the GDP growth and look at where they are today. And I challenge the assumption being made that this one income tax cut is going to sort out what appears clearly as a structural problem. Now, what is a structural problem? It's not some abstract intellectual hypothesis. The truth is that if you read the economic survey, it tells you that there is regulatory cholesterol in India. It tells you that the government needs to get out of the way, that there is clearly an environment that is stifling private investment because of the whole culture of the ED, income tax and IT, etc. And let's look at the last point, because you seem to be in a bit of a hurry, but I will like to add this point before you move on.
I actually want to get a word in from Mr. Deora before he logs out, because you referred to him. So finish your point.
Even if you look at the relief given to the middle class, much overdue, and I personally believe it should have happened a lot earlier. Out of that relief, if anyone believes that 2 crore taxpayers who actually genuinely don't have zero tax returns out of the approximately 7 crore who filed returns, to believe that that will result in new private investment, higher consumption demand, it will change exports. I mean, government expenditure.
So you're saying it's not enough, and it's over-exaggerated, it's headline management, etc. Standard responses. But Mr. Deora, it's a bit rich, I think, today coming from the opposition, suggesting that the blame for cesses, taxes, extortion, terrorism only lies with the centre. I mean, look at these state governments that are run by some of the opposition parties, Mr. Deora. And I want to bring to your attention how, for instance, Rajasthan government in 2021, the Congress imposed additional tax on fuel. In Punjab, there was a hike in VAT on fuel in 2022. AAP runs that government. In HP and Karnataka, as we speak, there is talk every day of certain cesses that are imposed so that welfare packages or reverie, or call it what you want to, can be financed. And most importantly, all these governments, these opposition governments, when the government came and said, look, let's put fuel under GST, so it's sort of, tabled up at 28%. They had a problem with it because they all wanted to line their own pockets. So, I don't know if now the FM has decided to come out and sort of bail out. And you've also seen the graph. You can see that this is not some one-off. Under the UPA, right till the end, only up till about 2 lakhs were exempted. That margin has been going up, and that graph is there. So I mean, how do you respond to the cynicism that is being unspooled by Mr. Jha here?
Very quickly, Rahul. Unfortunately, I do have to log out. But see, Sanjay firstly is a good friend of mine, and Sanjay is one of the brighter minds in the opposition. Unfortunately, we lost Dr. Manmohan Singh recently. I remember the kind of troubles Dr. Manmohan Singh faced as Prime Minister of India from within his own government. Unfortunately, the way the UPA government itself was creating hurdles after hurdles, and the ease of doing business was getting harder and harder from within his own government. That's a separate issue. I do agree on one point, that there is, when we talk about regulation, and the finance minister talked about appointing a committee that will quickly suggest to the finance ministry on how they can deregulate certain sectors. I do think that the more the government gets out of the way, especially for smaller businesses, the better they perform. Today, Rahul, again, since I was talking about a global context, look at what America is doing.
Yeah.
The greatest, largest economy in the world. I'm not suggesting we should have something like DOGE or the Department of Government Efficiency. But to me, the DOGE encompasses many areas. One of those areas could be disinvestment, for instance, selling loss-making PSUs. Another area could be cutting bureaucracy. A third area could be cutting regulations. So I think today's budget is a reflection of those realities, of those challenges. I'm glad that we've understood and that the finance minister has taken those concrete measures. Because today we have to be ready to compete with what the world is going to throw at us.
Okay.
And I think today is a first step. What will happen in the months ahead? How will this regulatory committee decide on which regulation should be curbed? How will we ensure that the new income tax bill prevents harassment by officials and actually implements the true intent of the government? As I said earlier, that there's a famous saying that no matter who you vote for, the government always gets in. So sometimes making the bureaucracy more efficient and ensuring that the bureaucracy doesn't become a hurdle but becomes, in a sense, a catalyst for India's growth story. That to me is the crux of taking India forward and ease of doing business, which doesn't necessarily have to be presented by the finance minister. Finance minister's budget speech is about numbers. This is a work in progress that has to happen 12 months of
the intent is there. That's the fundamental point. The intent is there.
I do think that there is an intent. I do think that there is a recognition of the global challenges.
Yeah.
There is a recognition of the political and technological disruptions that are underway.
Sure.
And that the government has to reform. As Buddhadev Bhattacharya famously said, reform or perish. So I hope
I think that message has gone out. The CA said exactly the same. It can't be business as usual, and we have seen the implications. Thank you, Mr. Deora, for joining us. Let me open this up and bring back some of our other guests here, and I want to go back to KV Subramanian. Let me play devil's advocate. Let me pick up from where Mr. Jha sort of stopped and say that why has it taken so long for the FM to benefit the middle class with this tax cut? What do you make of that?
I think that maybe some of the pushback on the tax aspects that has happened over the last year, in GST included, has really sort of made the government realize that the middle class is angry and therefore needs to be provided the necessary impetus. I think that's the way I look at it.
No, let me press on. The opposition is saying that this is nearly not enough. You heard Sanjay Jha, you've heard the others who have been speaking through the day. They say this is nearly not enough. This tax cut isn't going to really do much. I don't know if they're ignoring the other initiatives that have been announced in the budget or not. I can't speak for them. But what do you make of this argument?
Look, Rahul, you and I both agree that the difference between a cynic and a visionary is that a cynic looks for, a challenge in every opportunity, and visionaries actually look for, opportunities in every challenge. I think, this is something that is very, very useful. Yes, is more work required, especially in simplifying GST. I think I agree with that. even the tax code, and I'm really going to be waiting to and watching what is the content of the new tax code that will get tabled in parliament next week, which, as the finance minister said, is likely to have about half of the sections of the 1961 income tax act and half the number of pages. That could potentially mean significant reduction in complexity, but I think we'll have to watch for the details. So overall, I think greater simplification, and especially for the bureaucracy to focus on on simplification, is something that is required. But we've got to give credit where it is due, rather than just keep hammering on the negatives all the time.
Okay, so stay with me. I want to bring in Aparijita Sarangi, also Sanjay Jha and Karan Bhasin. Welcome to the show. Aparijita Sarangi, not only a member of parliament, but also a member of the finance committee. So I'll just come out to you. But Sanjay Jha, very quickly, counter question. You can't be a part of the problem and then sort of hypocritically take the high ground when it suits you. I mean, just look at your record. The Congress promised a large number of reforms in the agriculture sector that encompassed the 3 farm laws. Problem with it, you resigned, you went after Modi, to the point that he had to pull back. You pushed the envelope on a large number of reforms with land acquisition. When Modi sort of came in, he had a problem with it. Then he sort of revised and he flipped, as you know. And then when it came to it, you again opposed. So you did another counter flop. This has been going on, and on the issue of taxes, I mean, I pointed out these examples to you. If the opposition is so concerned about price rise, this, that, the other, and the burden and the Gabbar Singh tax, etc., bring fuel, for instance, under the GST. Why don't you do it in the states you run?
Yeah, Rahul, since you mentioned what you did, let me tell you that the BJP opposed the GST. So let's not go down that road.
I'm saying,
and as far as
I'm
Mr.
saying, but that
Modi
doesn't
is
mean
concerned,
that. All I'm saying, Mr. Jha, is that you can't be
We are
part
having
of the
good
problem,
conversation,
whether
don't
the
interrupt.
BJP was or not. But today they're in power and they're asking for your cooperation. Since all of you think in the national interest, these are interesting and critical reforms which
so
will
let me
push
try and-
the needle forward and lift people out of poverty.
Yeah. So let me answer you very quickly. You mentioned the farm laws. Let's put the record straight. You have a BJP MP here as well.
Yeah.
Mr. Modi's speech, you should actually replay that on your show. He apologized to the farmers, saying that it was being done in haste.
Mr. Jha,
He withdrew
Mr.
the bills.
Jha,
I don't think the opposition
Mr.
did it.
Jha, look,
The
I
farmers
have
protested
come
and he
out.
withdrew the
I
bill.
have come out and criticized the Prime Minister for doing a rollback, right? But that doesn't mean that the policy was wrong. The recommendations came from a committee that was set up by the UPA. The UPA promised pretty much the same to all the farmers in Punjab. You hold the country to ransom. And then you say, oh, well, the PM, you see, what can you do? You don't let Parliament function. There is a siege of the Red Fort. There are people who are put through misery. You collude with, or at least that's the impression one gets from what the BJP says, with international press to put pressure, etc., etc. When the Prime Minister comes out and says, okay, I'm sorry, you have a problem with that also. So I don't think you can eat your cake and bake it. Hang on, just...
Rahul, let me finish.
But tell me, answer the question. If price rise, burdens, etc., are such a big issue, why doesn't the Congress party in the states that it is in power, or the opposition when it's in power, agree, let's say on the GST, bring it under fuel, bring fuel under GST?
Yeah. Okay, let me answer you very quickly. You know, the announcement that I'm hearing today reminds me of 2019. I remember there were many analysts who said that the corporate tax cut...
I asked you a straight question, Mr. Jha.
Can I finish
without your interruption? Answer me. Why hasn't fuel been brought under GST? Why do the states...
You should ask that of the BJP.
Okay, you should ask that of the BJP. Okay, now let me bring in Ms. Sarangi. Ms. Sarangi, we all know, and you are familiar with parliamentary practice. Okay, one second. That there is a commission which involves representatives of the state and the center.
To answer that.
Okay, I'm getting him to answer. Relax, calm down. And there is this commission where equal stakeholdership is the norm. Therefore, I mean, I don't even understand why Mr. Sanjay Jha is putting the ball in your court, but perhaps you can clarify on this point.
What stops the BJP from bringing petroleum into the
sir,
GST
because
there?
and please, sir, someone described you as an intelligent person. you need the, you need the support in the GST Council, my dear friend, of the opposition. It's a joint council. Please, are you rewriting 101 economics here? Anyhow, Ms. Sarangi, please.
I think we are digressing from the central concern today.
Yeah.
Today we are discussing the budget, which has been welcomed by 140 crore Indians, barring a few people here and there. I think let's all focus on the budget. It's a great day for us. And let us see what are the big points that are there in the budget, the brightest spots in the budget. I think today I would like to focus on those. As far as Sanjay Jha's question is concerned,
so let me ask you a pointed question. Will this budget, Ms. Sarangi, will this budget, to direct your thoughts, will this budget lead to an 8% growth cycle?
Let me tell you, there is something very interesting about this budget which no speaker has spoken about till now, no speaker has highlighted till now, and that is about the fiscal deficit. Our government had been talking about coming to 4.5% of the GDP fiscal deficit, and today it has been estimated that this budget would lead to 4.4% of the fiscal of the GDP. That's a great thing that will be happening, and we must actually appreciate that. We will definitely be doing well as far as the growth rate is concerned, but I must say something. This budget, if you analyze it very carefully, does not just talk of acceleration of growth rate. It also intends to ensure that the benefits of growth are properly shared. So I think this is something which all of us should actually realize. And the number two thing which not many of us have been focusing is the capital expenditure that it has been talking of, very high. It's 11.21 lakh crore. Yeah. It's 3.1% of the GDP, yes. 11 lakh and 21,000 crore, it's 3.1% of the GDP. This is something which is very, very important and which we should not lose sight of. And of course, we have been talking about the middle class income tax cuts and all that. Entire day we have been talking about that, and this has been really, really welcomed by the middle class citizens. But at the same time, I would say that this was the charge against us. This was the charge against Prime Minister Modi's government, that we are not focusing on the middle class. Now we have started this income tax exemptions from the year 2005. Yeah. 1 lakh rupees, and here we are with 12 lakh rupees. I think all of us are aware of. We will not mention those. What is good about this budget is its balancing approach. You know, the hardware and the software, these two kinds of components are kind of, balanced, and that's the best part nobody has been talking about.
Okay.
What do I mean by this?
Yeah.
What do I mean by this? I talked of the capital expenditure, one part. Let us call them hardware components related to the capital expenditure. We are also talking of the AI education, 500 crore rupees for AI education and 5 AI excellence centers. Very important. And today, one particular line of Madam Nirmala Sitharaman, in fact, caught our attention: make for India, make for the world. It's not just make in India, make for India and make for the world.
Let me ask Karan
Bhasin, we need to have 5
is this budget going to unleash domestic animal spirits? Mr. Karan Bhasin, give us 2 quick points on this.
Well, short answer, yes. I'll just jump off from what Professor Subramaniam was saying, that there is a definite short-term effect that we'll see in this year itself, but there's also a long-term effect of reducing taxes, which is why I'm always for lower taxes, because it restricts the government's ability to have a large state, right? We had Sanjay Jha talk about regulation. Yeah. Well, if the government does not have money, it cannot hire many regulators, and that means by definition, government has to kind of reduce the amount of regulation, the amount of staff that it has to administer those regulations, and so on and so forth. So in some sense, this large tax cut is kind of very progressive, because it is by its very design going to force the government to restrict regulation, and that's going to have very long-term consequences. We really have this situation where tax rates in India were ridiculously high, and middle class, of course, didn't benefit from them.
So you are actually saying that this is going to be a transformative, it's going to have a transformative impact on boosting demand. These are very interesting views, viewers. I'm running out of time because I'm joined by 2 very, very celebrated individuals, N.K. Singh and also, of course, Ashwini Vaishnav. Now, the tax cut has captured the headlines, but has the FM done enough beyond that to nudge India close to the 8% GDP growth rate that is needed to boost per capita incomes to developed country levels by 2047? That's the fundamental question. I put these questions to N.K. Singh first, viewers. Mr. Singh, thank you very much for speaking to me. The budget was presented today on the back of what the EAC said was the need to not allow business as usual to continue. Now, has the FM, in your opinion, adhered to his advice?
She perhaps has taken her own advice. She doesn't need the advice because the writings were quite obvious. The challenges were very evident. The challenges were both international and national. So from that point of view, this is not an incremental budget. I would certainly say this is, in more ways than one, a transformative budget. It is transformative, in my view, from 3 points of view. First, from the viewpoint of fundamental changes in the structure of our taxation. I think, Rahul, you know that I was involved in earlier tax reforms when we introduced the so-called tax slabs. But this budget has gone a step further in giving a very, very significant tax break at all levels of tax slabs. And more important, Rahul, it has done so without in any way compromising with the path and the glide path of fiscal deficit and debt management. Adherence to the target of 4.4, 4.5, along with a debt to GDP target of around 51% in the terminal year, a significant downward spiral in the debt to GDP, consistent with this kind of a tax reforms which has parted with over a lakh of crores, is, in my view, a very creditable achievement. So that point of view, this budget is not incremental, it is transformative. Two other factors, and I will stop there. One is it has been multifaceted, and it has been across the board and across the spectrum, significantly affected all segments of our economy. Illustratively, India is committed to the adherence of the nationally determined net zero target, which the Prime Minister in many ways authored, the so-called Paris Pact. The changes which have been brought about and how to harness renewable energy or nuclear power. I mean, Rahul, you remember, everybody, when Dr. Manmohan Singh passed away, paid him well-deserved tributes that he had authored, the famous Indo-US nuclear agreement, but we could not harness the advantage. We will now harness its advantage by the changes which have been announced and those in the offing, being able to harness nuclear power, which, by the way, and that's related to my third point, that if India wants to be at the cutting edge of AI, that cutting edge requires a huge energy consumption. From where is the energy to be met? And I think that is now a credible answer that modular nuclear powers and harnessing the atomic energy, which is a renewable form of energy, would be a path forward. Finally, I would say agriculture, skill development, and being able to combine the advantages of a change in agricultural habits, genuinely moving towards environmentally more sustainable crops while making it more nutritious, in terms of becoming self-sufficient in pulses, in self-sufficient and encouraging the use of fisheries, of fruits and vegetables in consonance with the changing consumer patterns and the need for nutrition. It has addressed various segments, and the fillip which it has given to MSEB, being an important provider of job and a contributor to GDP. So if you look at the whole multifaceted areas which this budget has, in many ways, I would say that this is certainly by no means an incremental budget, which were many past budgets, not necessarily of Nirmala, have been. But this, in my view, is a transformative budget, looking at the far-reaching implications it has in boosting consumer preference, in boosting the availability of resources to expand private consumption, agriculture, urban development, in consonance with the changing needs of what technology has to offer.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view because, as you know, the market reaction has been less than appreciative, just to put it politely. But deregulation is the need of the hour, given the various headwinds, the desensitization really of cross-border trade and the movement of people, goods and services that we're expected to encounter in a MAGA world, in a Trump world or a mega world, European Union that wants to become great again and so forth. Now, deregulation was something that was stressed upon even by the EAC. Where is that in this budget? There is no roadmap for it, some people argue.
Let me put it this way to you. I gave an example of on the atomic stuff. Isn't that deregulation? She has promised a high-level committee to look into how to simplify rules and regulations and to come up with recommendations which are credible. That's a credible effort in trying to find out the further areas where deregulation, 100% insurance being permitted. Isn't that deregulation as part of being able to attract greater direct foreign investment? If you look at the other areas of being able to attract direct foreign investment, those are all part of a deregulation process. I'm sure that what the chief economic advisor had hinted are some of these things, many of which have been addressed. Look at the whole direct tax code, which is in the offing and whose bill will be introduced next week. Isn't that deregulation? Simplifying the entire taxation structure. She has hinted at not only on direct taxes, but some hints on what needs to be done on indirect taxes. The number of simplification which has taken place in the area of customs, the number of compliances which have been called off, is that simplification? Those are the kinds of changes which the CA would have had in mind when he talked and mentioned about the need for deregulation to be an important catalyst for growth and for change.
Lastly, Mr. N.K. Singh, many people said that, look, we have to grow now year on year, 8% plus, if we are to become truly Viksit by 2047. Is this budget going to put us on that track, the 8% plus track?
Let me put it this way to you. If you look at the fact that the IMF says that by certainly we will become not only a $5 trillion economy, but by 2030 a $6.1 trillion economy. That implies that in nominal terms in US dollar, we would have grown in recent years at nominal terms at 10% already. So the compounded value of 10%, if you bump it up by 1 or 2 more percentage points, some of which are really embedded in many of these things which I have mentioned, the fact of adhering to the path of fiscal consolidation, I believe, Rahul, that this adherence and a credible debt plan will be an important factor in permitting rating agencies for a further upgrade of India's credit standing, which in my view.
We're joined now, of course, by the Minister of Railways, Union Minister of Railways, IT, and also INB, a person who holds many portfolios in the Modi government and someone who has distinguished himself as an effective minister. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, thank you very much for speaking to me on an important day. The budget, of course, was presented by the Finance Minister. It has captured the headlines. I'll come to the reason why it's captured the headlines, but first your assessment on whether the budget's recommendations, whether the budget itself has in some ways mirrored the recommendations of the Eco Survey, which was a very frank document. In fact, quite frank, which said it cannot be business as usual. So have we seen this budget now breaking away from business as usual?
Absolutely. If you look at the reforms done in the last 10 years, there has been a significant wave of reforms, and that has really helped the economy come to such a level that we are at today. And the Eco Survey presented some very good thoughts on, very good data on what is the cost of regulation, how we should be looking at nuts and bolts, how we should be looking at those small irritants which have to be removed. And I am thankful to Honorable Finance Minister that in her budget speech today, she has mentioned removal of so many regulations, and she has actually mentioned that we should do away with the mindset of the past, which was based on a very kind of, we should change the mindset to trust based rather than having a mindset which is punishment based. So this is a big change, and our Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Finance Minister deserve huge kudos for bringing this dream budget.
So could you elaborate on some of these measures that you are speaking about that will help to deregulate the economy?
I'll specifically give some examples. In the electronics manufacturing sector, we have about $110 billion worth electronics manufacturing today. We are manufacturing PCs, servers, laptops, mobile phones, medical electronics. Now in this sector, the component ecosystem is what we are aiming as the next step. For the component ecosystem, we needed a lot of simplification in the customs structure, in the number of slabs, so that the classification does not create problems. We needed simplification in the way permanent establishment is defined. We needed simplification in the way warehousing is done. And I am so grateful to the Honorable Finance Minister. She has actually considered all these inputs, and the reforms have been announced today. So that kind of approach, where we go sector by sector, product by product, look at what is actually required, and then do the simplification actions which are required for that particular sector or for that particular product line.
Well, many people are saying that a lot of the deregulation work has been left to a committee. The problem is well known. The committee now will sort of sit and look over what needs to be further done. Could this not have been sort of predated to today itself?
Well, it is a continuous process. We have seen so many such cases. For example, in case of telecom, I am sure you know that there used to be a series of requirements, permissions which were required for setting up a tower. And today practically 89% of the tower permissions come in a single stroke of a button, right? Same is the case in case of setting up cargo terminals connecting with railways, right? It used to take many years. Now you can complete the entire project from permission to commissioning within a few months. So those kind of simplifications are continuous, and the mechanism which gets created so that any sector which requires those simplifications to be done, they come to a particular mechanism. That's a very good mechanism. I think that is the way it should be, so that it is a very harmonious and a proper system by which the reforms can be done continuously.
Mr. Vaishnav, what do you think on a priority this committee must look into? What are some of the more trickier regulations that serve as a disincentive to investment, to business entrepreneurship?
Listen, there is a very positive environment about business entrepreneurship, about investments in our country. People look at India as a trusted country. We respect IP rights, we have a lot of talent, and now we need to work out issues related to land acquisition, issues related to permissions, issues related to very small things which are crucial in that one day that a person saves while setting up a factory, that 1 week that is required which can be saved by making the permissions online. Those are the kinds of nuts and bolts which are required, and every sector will have different things. There is no one brush which paints all. We'll have to really work sector by sector, product by product to get the things done, and we have demonstrated in so many different sectors, and that can be done even now.
So I'm glad actually that you have touched upon some of this, because there is a feeling, and I've been speaking to a couple of experts, and they sort of talk about the lukewarm response, let's say, of the stock markets, for example, and they say that, reform glide path could have been enunciated more clearly. For example, the question of notifying the labor laws that are hanging fire now for quite a considerable amount of time, as you know, simplifying land acquisition laws, dispute resolution is something else that could perhaps have been pushed through in this particular budget. How do you respond to this sort of criticism that is coming through? Above and above, of course, the tax reform, which is now set to be really the game changer, but this other stuff that could have really pushed us closer to the 8% glide path also.
We have created many examples. If you look at, let's say, the telecom law as well as the data protection law, there are so many mechanisms which have got created which are really appreciated by the investors. For example, there is a construct of voluntary undertaking. If a law or a rule has been somehow got violated, then the firm has a chance, should have an option to go to the authorities and say, okay, I made this mistake, here is what I am going to do to rectify it, and both of them can agree on some sort of penalty and then move forward. So those kind of mechanisms have been created and demonstrated. We have the entire Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which is built on trust, which is built on justice, right? That is a very big reform which is already in front of us. So we have those mechanisms now which can now be replicated across different sectors.
How do you see these tax breaks? Do you think they will actualize consumption? And if so, how?
See, if you look at all the engines of our economy, investment is already, public investment holding steady, 11,20,000 crore rupees is huge, humongous. That investment is there, deregulation drive is already on, manufacturing focus, which is a very big lever for driving our economy, that is there, housing is picking up. I'm sure with this kind of tax break, the entire middle class, and it's a large number, it's a very large number, and the new middle class again is very large. So in such circumstances, the extra savings which will get funnelized, which will get channelized into either investment or consumption, both will be useful for the economy. Each and every household will have something surplus left. EMIs can be paid with more comfort, better education facilities, better healthcare, better amenities at home. All that has become possible because of this 12 lakh rupees annual income being exempted from income tax. It's a very big move, and I thank Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Finance Minister for this. It's a really big move.
So if the benefits were so obvious, Mr. Vaishnav, why has it taken this long for this particular major tax policy announcement, these cuts, to come from the government? This criticism of the Modi government as not having sort of courted the middle class, so to speak, has been going on for the last couple of years, as you yourself know. So suddenly what has changed? Some people are alluding to, of course, political reasons. Others are saying that, look, the Delhi election is upon us. I think you're probably aware of what is being said. So
no,
I want to understand.
I wouldn't agree with this.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't agree with this point. See, the point is, the 10 years, if you look at it, the first 5 years were basically dedicated to bring the industry, bring the economy, bring the banking sector, bring the financial services sector, bring the governance structure out of a deep hole where the UPA government had left it, right? It was a real mess. India was in fragile 5. Bringing it out and making it on a normal course was a very big effort which required huge amount of time and effort, and managing the economy in a very fine, very difficult time frame. The second term, if you see, is a growth term. Despite the 2 years of COVID, despite that, there has been a very good consistent growth. And today we have an economy where we are 324 lakh crore rupees economy today, and growing at nominal 11%, 10%, and inflation is moderate. When we have an economy of this shape and size, and our central government balance sheet is very good, the liabilities are just about 56 or 57%, I mean definitely less than 60%. So with that kind of healthy balance sheet, that kind of work which has been done in the past, if you look at the complete macro picture, this macro picture presents us opportunities where we can keep the fiscal deficit under control and we can pass on lots of benefits to the people. So that kind of thing is possible only after sustained work that needs to be done on an economy. Then only such circumstances can be arrived at. And this has definitely taken time because it requires that kind of effort. The economy was in such a bad shape. So that's why if you look at the global scenario today, most of the countries are running fiscal deficits of 5, 6, 5.5%. And these are large economies, right? And we are today able to give tax breaks, manage to keep our investment program steady and simultaneously maintain a good healthy fiscal condition. So that's the scenario. It's like what we call the Goldilocks moment. So that kind of situation we have. Our Prime Minister's economic thinking. He has a very good economic thinking. If you look at it, let's say immediately after COVID. After COVID, when the entire world was sending out checks, our Prime Minister decided to focus on maintaining the long-term health of the economy by focusing on investment. Imagine the Nobel laureates who were putting the pressure on us to do helicopter money, right? That kind of approach was there. But our Prime Minister used his economic thinking and his economic point of view, and by that he brought our economy to such a healthy state where today the entire world is admiring his thinking.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vaishnav. Thank you very much for sparing this time and giving us these insights. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.